to session 4 of Mindfulness Matters, an online demand series to help you stay present and help boost productivity in the workplace and beyond. Today we are going to explore our thoughts, how our thoughts distract us, and how we can use them to become more present. And we'll be doing this through a practice, guided practice, as we have done in the previous sessions, and I'll also be giving you some more takeaways to experiment with at home. So about me, another short reintroduction. My name's Lily Parkinson. I'm founder of my company Umiani, where I work as a holistic and intuitive coach, a registered nutritional therapist, and I work with NLP, EFT and CBT, as well as being a Reiki practitioner, and I work with both private and corporate clients. So our thoughts, we've discussed thoughts a little bit in the past sessions, but we're going to delve a little bit deeper today. And I'll start by saying that our thoughts can obviously be positive or negative. They can be helpful or they can be unhelpful, and they can actually be really destructive if we're not aware of the types of things that we're thinking. And thoughts can work similarly to how they can become a mixed bag, and they affect us in a way that they create fixed mental habits, and this can inhibit our natural flow, or flow state as I like to call it. Of course, they can have the opposite effect, and our thoughts can be really creative, they can be innovative, and they can get us to where we want. But we have to keep in check what our mind is thinking and be aware of the different types of thoughts that we have. When we get fixed to particular thoughts, we can become distracted. And we've discussed this a little bit before. But when we become distracted by some particular thoughts, we get stuck in a vortex, and it can be hard to get out of it. So this can be thinking about the past, or it could be daydreaming or thinking into the future. And not many of our thoughts are ever really focused on what's happening right here, right now. We think they might be, but they are skewing our perception. And we need to tune into these sense perceptions that I've been speaking about to help us understand what's happening right here, right now, not comparing it to something that's happened before or wishing it to be a different way in the future. We need to focus on the now. Now, our thoughts can cause different emotions or sensations within the body, such as stress, anxiousness, joyfulness, excitement, and you'll be aware of some of the sensations and emotions that we feel, but some of them we can sometimes tune into a little bit better. If we are speculating over something in the future, we start planning things, we're trying to control things that are happening in the future. Perhaps we start comparing, we start judging, and we start procrastinating, okay? And so these thoughts occupy our minds and distract us, taking us out of our body and out of the present moment. And this can make it really hard for us to move forward with anything, really, with a project at work, with a relationship with a family member or a partner, or in a friendship. Perhaps we're working on a particular hobby-based project, or we want to learn something new, but perhaps we're having thoughts that are holding us back. We find it hard to make decisions. It's going to affect our sense-making ability, so making sense of what's happening around us generally in the world and in our immediate environment. And also stops us being empowered in ourselves and prevents us from really being able to face challenges or adversity that we might experience in our life from a place of centeredness, from a place of balance, and from being grounded. And when we can access these places, which we can do through mindfulness, then everything flows much better. We find peace and we find joy. So I'll come on to that next. But that's what the practice of mindfulness is really helping us achieve, where we go back to the definitions that we spoke about in session 1. It's about being non-judgmental, it's about having compassion, it's becoming non-reactive to certain things and being able to process what's happening in this moment from a more balanced place. Now, we don't always have to be talking about positivity, because positive thoughts don't always replace negative thoughts. It doesn't always work like that, and you'll know from practice. You can't just think away a negative thought by putting in place a positive experience. So let's continue. So how do thoughts distract us? So thoughts go through the mind all the time. Now, there is a big difference between thoughts going through the mind and us being aware of the thoughts going through your mind. I've spoken about this before, but we have between 60,000 and 80,000 thoughts per day, which is a lot of thoughts. That's a lot of stuff to be having to deal with, as well as functioning in our daily lives, carrying out our jobs, having fun, winding down. And if we take 70,000 as a benchmark, that equates to 3,000 per hour, 50 per minute, and just under 1 per second. And so without our awareness of these thoughts, there is only movement of these thoughts through our mind. Perhaps we're aware of some thoughts, perhaps we get stuck on particular thoughts, but we are just having this constant movement through our minds of thoughts, and this is distracting and stops us being able to really focus and be present, be aware. These thoughts form our narrative, how we speak to ourselves a lot of the time, and without awareness, we end up identifying with these particular streams of thinking, which could be negative, could also be positive, but generally they are reactive to the world around us. We are responding reactively to what's happening, rather than from a calm and centered place, or perhaps being proactive. And in the face of adversity, or challenges, it could be grief, sadness, fear, confusion, we often make it worse as we generalize through our thoughts, and we generalize how we are feeling and how it affects us, and we start projecting, and we're projecting into the future. How is what's happening in the past, or what of all this stream of thinking, how is this, what are these thoughts that are occupying my mind now, how are they affecting me as I go into the future? What does it mean for me in a week's time, by tomorrow, in 5 years' time? And you can see, and you've probably experienced how this really affects us, and it makes the challenging situation even more challenging. And we believe these stories that we create in our mind about what's happening in the future, and we believe it to be our reality, when in fact it's not. And it's not because in the present moment, all of these things that's going through your head are not happening. They haven't happened yet. And as I said before when we spoke about this, a lot of the time when we project into the future, or we think something is going to happen, if it eventually does happen, then it's often not as bad as we first thought it would be in our minds. So in order to change this, or in order to get ourselves out of this form of thinking, what we want to do is become more intensely and acutely aware of the present moment, coming into awareness. Because without this awareness, we become at the mercy of our minds, of the conditioned mind, without knowing. And by conditioned mind, I mean from perhaps beliefs that we've been brought up to believe through by our parents, or from school, or from religion, or from race. And we become at a mercy, and we think that that is our reality. And so when we're here, we're basically a victim of our mind, and our mind can sometimes be our worst enemy. So once we start to begin to cultivate awareness through mindfulness, and through connecting to the present moment, we become more aware of our senses and our sense perceptions, which we've discussed before, which is the environment around us. And we also end up being able to become aware of the thinking mind and what the mind is producing. So out of these, say, 70,000 thoughts a day, we did this exercise before briefly, but how many of these thoughts are from the past? How many of them are negative? How many of them are positive? How many of them are self-critical? How many of them are comparisons? How many of them are judgments? So once we start to become aware of all of these different types of thoughts that we're having and what our mind is producing, then we can kind of get an understanding whether we are producing a factual or fictional perception of our world. Now, if we're predicting into the future, then our experience is going to be based on fiction, because how do we know what's going to happen in the future? How do we know it's going to play out exactly like that? And, you know, a great example, although not one to speak about lightly, is we were all going about our lives in particular ways. There were some things in our wider environment that weren't ideal. Perhaps we had strong views on particular things, but we're going through life. And one day, a virus hits Asia, and we're aware of it, and we think, oh, it's just in Asia. And then suddenly, our whole country and every other country in the world goes to lockdown, and we are in isolation, and we are locked away from seeing our families and our loved ones. And we had all these plans for our lives this year, and so we could never have predicted that. And at the beginning of this lockdown, I know myself, you know, I had all these visions of how tough it was going to be, or perhaps all of these things that I wanted to do during this time. And, you know, all of the things that perhaps I imagined or predicted into the future, some happened, but definitely didn't happen in the way that I thought. Some amazing things happened that I didn't even think were possible, and some not so good things happened. So once we stop predicting what's happening into the future and focusing our attention there, and we give more energy into what's happening in the now, because really now is all that exists. You know, there was the past, but when it was the past, it was happening now, and when the future happens, it will happen then, it will happen now. But every time and every moment there is only the now exists. So if these are the types of thoughts that we're telling us, perhaps, you know, they're negative or fear-based, then this is often going to reflect how we feel emotionally, because our emotions reflect our mind activity. So that's why, you know, positive thinking, affirmations, meditation, you know, it's all raved about, and people like to practice, because it's the practice of heightening our thoughts and moving away from self-limiting and negative thoughts, doubting thoughts, fearful thoughts. And when we change these, then we can live from this sense of joy, this sense of happiness, this completeness and centeredness. So once we've dropped into this aware state, through the body, through our senses, and we really start living in our experience of the now, we're really present, then we can find this new sense of energy. And maybe some of you found it in the previous practice from last session. But we're taken away from a kind of the energy draining old thought processes that become exhausted, listening to our old stories and the narratives that we've created in our minds. Similar to, if you've got a friend or a family member that keeps going on about a particular thing, and you kind of think, oh, stop going on about it. This is exactly what happens in our own head, and it becomes exhausting listening to ourselves. And so when we can quieten this and we become more focused in the present, then we get this new sense of energy, this peace. And from this place, we can access the joy, no matter what challenging situation we're going through or what adversity that we're facing. And in the face of adversity, we are then able to arise from it. We can see it for exactly what it is. We're not denying anything. We're not denying that perhaps the adversity that it's causing, or any other elements that this adversity is producing. But through this deeper level of awareness of what's happening and of ourselves, then we can begin to see how, and we can begin to feel that the problem right now in this moment for us isn't perhaps as big and as devastating as it was when we were in a frenzy and we were thinking about the future. And this is because our mind is quiet. We can understand, we can see it for as it is, we can experience it for as it is. We're not relating it to the past. We're coming to our senses, if you want to use that term, and we look what's around us, and we can become more calm and grounded, and then we can make the decisions. Then we can make sense of what's happening, and we can move forward from that place. So, going into the guided practice, hopefully that wasn't too much information and wasn't confusing, but we'll be working on this in the final 2 sessions. So, finding a comfy seat on your chair with your feet on the floor and your hands in your lap. You can have your eyes closed or open for this guided practice. I normally recommend closed, but whatever feels most comfortable to you. And to start with, we're going to breathe through the nose rather than the mouth. So bringing your focus and your attention to your breath, finding the rhythm of your breath. Just focusing your attention on the breath as it passes through your nostrils and as it passes out again through your nostrils. Through this practice, or through this first part of the practice, the breath is going to be our object of concentration. And as always, if our minds start wandering, we can come back to the rhythm of the breath. So as we're breathing through our nose, just observing the coolness of the air as you inhale, as it passes through the nostrils. and the slightly warmer air as you exhale through the nostrils. Paying close attention to the sensation as the air passes through. And remembering that breath is our object of concentration. Noticing if something is taking you away from the object of concentration, our breath. What thoughts are coming into your consciousness, your awareness? Are you daydreaming? Are you trying to sense make of something that happened earlier in your day? Allow yourselves to feel the enticing qualities of these stories, these fictions. Allow yourself to feel to want to travel with these thoughts. And simply notice that you do, but come back to the breath. Find your anchor through the breath. Perhaps you have a habit of going over something that happened in the past. Take the moment and let it go. Let it be. Notice your want or the feeling that you need to mull it over in your mind and return to the breath for now. Perhaps you're creating this self-narrative, this story that you keep telling yourself, self-limiting perhaps, based on an insecurity or a fear. Just name it as that and come back to the breath. There is nothing to fear in this moment. There is just the breath. Perhaps you find yourself speculating. Note that you are, and come back to the breath. Perhaps you were judging yourself or others, making comparisons. Return to the breath. Know that right now, you're doing the best that you can in this present moment. And if you find yourself planning ahead, simply label it as planning and come back to the breath. Are you calculating? Notice it, label it, and come back to the breath. We have a tendency to measure life, benchmark it, make comparisons. But we don't need to measure life. We can just appreciate what we have or what is. in this present moment. Notice if you are making lists or having a particular train of thought. Let the mind rest. Come back to the breath. Let your thoughts be as light as bubbles. Let them come in and out of your awareness, floating in bubbles. Always coming back to the breath, to your awareness, to the present moment, to your experience within, and your experience externally in the world, with the world around you. And just taking a moment to notice how you feel in the body, where your mind is, if you feel clearer, feel more calm, feel more centered. Perhaps you feel a little bit more anxious because you've become aware of some particular thoughts that you were having or that were racing through your mind. Know that that's okay. Know that that was in the past. Now we're in this exact moment. And so gently blinking your eyes open and coming back into the room. I hope that this practice has given you a little more understanding and ability to apply the principles that I've spoken about and using the practices in your daily life. The aim is to give you some insight into how our thoughts can wander off, but also how simple it is to bring them back, and how important it is to keep in check what we're thinking. And our minds don't always wander to the past and to the future just with negative thoughts. It can be positive thoughts too. And so it's not always a bad thing, but as soon as you're aware that you're thinking of the past or the future, or you're predicting, or you're judging, or you're comparing, or you're imagining, sometimes, as I've said, these can be good tools, but as soon as you're aware of that and that's what you're doing, then you're in the present moment and you can continue to be in the present moment. So takeaway practices so that you can have some more experimentation at home. So hopefully you all found an anchor from the end of last week's session. So whatever that anchor is, just using that in times of stress, when any challenges come up, in the face of any particular adversity. Perhaps it's with a loved one, perhaps it's at work, anywhere, anytime. Just remembering to use your anchor and come back to the present moment. And I've also put in journaling here, and a lot of you may have some resistance to this, but I really encourage you to just give it a go. It actually works better when you're physically putting pen to paper rather than journaling on your phone. But if that's the only opportunity that you get in your notes section, then go for it. And journaling, you don't have to think about what you're writing. You just connect, and it tends to flow out of you. And it can be a really great tool of finding out where your thoughts and your headspace is, because sometimes you journal and you start writing things and you kind of think, oh, I didn't realize I was even thinking about that. And a lot of thoughts that maybe happening on a deeper level that are disguised or being missed because we're thinking of things on a more immediate and superficial level. They can become uncovered, and that can be really helpful in helping you move forward. So I really invite you to just try it and see how you get on. And so for now, I will leave you with my contact details. Please do get in touch if you feel the call to find out any more about me or the work that I do or any of the practices that we've been through so far. See you soon. Thank you.